All right. Good evening and welcome. This week we're looking at Chapter 22. Chapter 2 is called Maintaining Behavior with Ratio Schedules. So we know if behavior is happening, it's occurring, and it occurs more than once, then there's something is reinforcing that behavior, something's maintaining it. Reinforcement basically either maintains and keeps behavior going, or reinforcement can make it go up, but reinforcement can't make it go down. Because by definition, reinforcement is from the behavior changes the environment, and that change in the environment is maintained by either getting access to something, positive reinforcement, access to a person, place, or thing, social or tangible or an activity, or negative reinforcement. Behavior occurs to stop something, to get away from a person, or get away from a place, get away from a thing. So as long as behavior is occurring, there's something maintaining it, some reinforcing properties of those consequences. And this chapter is about maintaining behavior. So once behavior is occurring, if we want to maintain it, we want to try to figure out how to schedule reinforcement to maintain it. If we want more behavior, we want to reinforce it more. And we know that how we schedule consequences based on the number of responses is going to affect the patterns of behavior. So let me mark Ronald in here. Ronald's checking in. And just to let you know, Ronald, I am recording this. I just started a minute or so ago, and I will be posting this on the same YouTube channel. Okay, so what I want to talk today, today's concepts are pretty nice and tight because we're just looking at ratio schedules. Next chapter, we're going to look at interval schedules, in which this will then balance out the two. I want to start by quickly reviewing the driving premise behind the whole idea of behavior analysis. I'll keep going to call back to the major issues, and then I want to hit these main concepts. I want to draw out the patterns for fixed and variable schedules. So start to recognize those and then talk about these other related concepts to response rates and behavior. So first of all, I go back to this driving premise that behavior analysis is science of behavior, and science is going to be about how do we make it a science by measuring it and manipulate variables and show changes in behavior. How do we demonstrate a functional relationship? How do we show experimental control? And so we're talking about behavior occurring. So science of behavior, and so behavior, this is the driving premise, is a function of the environment. In behavior analysis, we're always talking about how does the environment evoke behavior or evade behavior. Behaviors, environmental stimuli, antecedents and MOs will evoke or evoke behavior. They're behavior altering stimuli. So in our antecedent column, we have our MOs and our SDs. So those are our antecedents, and these are the behavior altering stimuli. And of course, we have the behavior, and then we have the consequences of behavior. So when the stimulus situations evokes the behavior, and that behavior changes the environment, and we have these consequences, and here something is going to be added or removed. So something is added, it's going to be positive. Something's removed, it was negative. And since this is about reinforcement chapter, ratio schedules, we're talking positive or negative reinforcement. And of course, then the function for this is going to be that behavior is either continuing or it's going up for the basics. So this is going to be behavior occurring on the response. Keep it in mind, if we talk about like a behavior of getting dressed, then the response class is all of those responses that add up together and make up the behavior getting dressed. So we got response classes are all the things that function to make that behavior happen. And those responses are all evoked by stimuli that come before behavior, and that's our stimulus class. So remembering stimulus classes are all the different things that evoke behavior. So if I were hungry and food deprived, then the motivating operation is I'm deprived, and so I'm going to engage in behavior. It evokes the behavior of looking forward, finding and eating food. So there's the MO. The MO doesn't make the food available. The MO doesn't make the food available. It just motivates the behavior to go find the food. The SD is where I respond to the actual refrigerator or the grocery store to get the food. And then those responses. So these stimuli, they're of the stimulus class. So in the case of getting dressed, the clothing items, underwear, socks, pants, shirt, belt, those are the stimulus class. And those items evoke the behavior of putting on all those responses to get dressed. And then now that I'm dressed, I can go outside and play. So there's my positive reinforcement. I wasn't dressed, I'm dressed, I can go out now, go shopping, go to the store, go play. So that's just stimulus class review. These things all evoke the behavior. They alter behavior by evoking it. If I'm hungry, it evokes food-seeking behavior. So I make the food and I eat it. Now, once I eat the food and I'm full, I'm satiated, then of course the behavior is abated. I stop doing it because I'm full. So that's the abated part of it. So it's evoked to go do it, and then after I do it and I'm full and I stop, that behavior is abated because now I'm already full. I'm satiated. So getting to the reinforcement schedules with behavior occurring, a quick callback to the 3 dimensions of behavior. So this phenomena, our field, our study is behavior, the analysis of behavior, the science of behavior, and we have these 3 critical dimensions. In order for something to be behavior, it has to meet all 3 elements. So very quickly, the first one is behavior occurs and repeats. Behavior has occurrence. We can measure the occurrence of behavior, and we can also measure when it doesn't occur. Sometimes we measure occurrence and non-occurrence of a behavior to see how much it's happening. So if it occurs and repeats itself, that's often a simple frequency count. We also remember that behavior has temporal extent. As soon as behavior occurs, it's happening for some extent of time. If we want to time how long it occurs, temporal extent, that's our duration measure. How long did the behavior happen? The frequency count is how many times it happened. So frequency is simple, how many times did it happen? And duration is how long did it happen? Now, if I take how many times it happened and divide by how much time it happened, then I can get a rate measure. Frequency, the number of responses, divided by the amount of time gives me rate. You're going to hear the idea that, well, frequency and rate are synonymous. Well, frequency was the count. The duration of time was how long it happened. So in order to get a rate measure, I need to have frequency a count. And I also can add the amount of time. It's more useful to know if you say he only did it twice in a year. Sounds like, well, that doesn't seem like a problem. But it turns out he blows up liquor stores. So that is a problem behavior, even though it happens twice a year. So if we say, what's the rate of behavior? Oh, twice a year. Well, is it a serious problem? Yeah, he blows up liquor stores or he robs banks. But this is just the basic idea of it occurs. We can measure its frequency. It occurs for some amount of time. That's duration. Number over time gives us rate. And then behavior's temporal locus, behavior happens at some point in time. So given these 3 properties of behavior, we can reinforce behavior based on these. Now, if we want to reinforce behavior based on time, we're talking about some kind of interval schedule, and that's going to be in the next chapter. So for now, I'm going to stick to the occurrence of behavior and when the locus, when it occurs, not how long it occurs. So we have our ratio schedules. Now, looking at behavior as far as reinforcement, what we've got is on one end of our continuum, continuous reinforcement is we're going to reinforce every single correct behavior. That's pretty familiar, pretty easy. So start a new behavior. We want to get it to happen, prompt it, get the behavior to occur, and we try to reinforce it every time to get it in the repertoire and get it started. And some behaviors are not going to be reinforced every single time they occur, and you can't always reinforce a kid every time he raises his hand. But we start with it, strengthening the behavior, then we can thin that schedule to more natural environments. So between every single response on the far end, we have extinction, where we reinforce none of the responses. And so this is going to be every response. So just to put the perspective of reinforcement as a concept, reinforcement is a natural process in the environment, and then we do procedures where we deliver, we help make changes happen after behavior. And when they do happen, the behavior occurs, then we reinforce that with follow with some kind of stimulation that's reinforced, positive or negative. If the radio is too loud, you turn it down. You get reinforced by escaping the noise, and you are removing the aversive stimulus of a loud noise. Remember when we do our ABCs, there's something about the antecedents that evoke the behavior. Behavior changes the environment. When that environment change was favorable, if I couldn't hear the music, I'd turn it up, I add more volume. If it's too loud, I'd turn it down, I reduce the volume. In either case, I'm engaging in the behavior, so it has reinforcing properties. If I ask someone else to turn it down, then it just made it socially mediated, but it still turns down the noisy radio, so that was negative reinforcement. I had someone else do it for me, or I did it myself. So for as far as reinforcement, the process, the idea where behavior changes the environment and that behavior is maintained or increased means there's reinforcing properties by how the environment changed. And we can go from reinforcing everything to not at all. So when we talk about a reinforcement schedule is a rule, a statement about how we're going to reinforce behavior. So if we say, what's the reinforcement schedule? Well, if it's a continuous schedule, means reinforce every correct response. Now, if you remember the automaticity of reinforcements, behavior is going to get reinforced in the environment, whether you plan it or not. And a lot of times, problem behaviors occur, and they have reinforcing properties. So automaticity means behavior is going to get reinforced. The actual reinforcer doesn't care if it's good or bad behavior, doesn't care if it's highlighted or void. The more reinforced, the more behavior occurs. So the idea that automaticity means it's going to have reinforcing property. In natural environments, behaviors get reinforced. Some of those are not good behaviors, but they still get strength. A lot of times the work we do is trying to try to arrange for no more reinforcement for problem behaviors. And we want to try to make so nothing reinforces the behavior. And if it's reinforcing all by itself, automatic reinforcement, if I've got nothing to do and I look around at the light and I start doing this, that's kind of cool. But I haven't done this since I took acid in the 1960s. It's pretty cool back then. Nowadays, they don't have that stuff anymore. So you just have to drink a lot of beer or something. I don't know. I can't drink beer. It puts me to sleep. But so this has reinforcing properties. And this is okay to do. But if you're doing it while the teacher's teaching or doing it while you're talking to friends, it sometimes could interfere with communication. And people find that. So we want to reinforce something else. They do this later. I just found an article where they were teaching a child his go-to would be to STEM. And said, that's okay to do, but not in the classroom, or not right now. So they basically came up with a green and a red stimulus card. And they told them, when it's green, the teacher would put, when it's green, go ahead. And when I turn to red, then stop and do your work. And they reinforced him working with it while it was red, his other behaviors. And then they turned it around so he could have it green. So it was okay to do it, but it was get it under stimulus control. So by the end, the study showed simply they could teach him that the green was like a go ahead and do it, and the red was don't do it now, do whatever else the teacher says. So sometimes we can get that behavior to occur under better conditions with stimulus control. And we do that. We get stimulus control by reinforcing these behaviors under certain antecedent conditions with certain schedules of reinforcement. So if we reinforce another behavior a lot, it won't have time to go somewhere else. When I work with parents, I often say, what are the problem behaviors so we can try to arrange to stop reinforcing them? If they're problems, that means they're getting too much reinforcement. But what are the good behaviors the child's doing? Don't forget, take what's already there, take what the environment gives you, and take what's good and try to reinforce it more. Because if we can reinforce more good behavior, there's less time to engage in the problem behavior. So if I can strengthen certain behavior under certain cues, I can say, okay, do it now, stop now, do something else. We can try to get it under some rule of reinforcement. So to have the idea, again, reinforcement's a rule, and the one rule is reinforce every correct response, and the extremist rule, don't reinforce any responses. So in between, we have what we call the intermittent reinforcement, which means something other than every single time. And those are sometimes called simple schedules of reinforcement, or just intermittent. And under the simple schedules, we have ratio schedules, which are response-based, the ratio of responses. And next week, we'll have interval schedules, which are based on time. We'll come back to this next week. With ratio schedules, if I'm reinforcing every single time, that's continuous, which is actually also equal to a fixed ratio of every one correct response. But typically, the idea of ratio is I need to move from reinforcing every single response to maybe every 3 responses. Get him to do it 3 times and then do it. Do 3 math problems and here's a sticker. 3 more math problems, here's a sticker. So I might start continuous and then I change it to a fixed ratio of 3 responses. Give me at least 3 responses, 3 correct answers in a row. Okay, because the teacher can't run around and give a sticker for every single correct response. I've got a bunch of kids in here. But I could get it under good, do the next one, call me, and I'll do 3 in a row. Then I can thin that schedule, get more behavior, and do 5 correct math problems. And it gets the NAS working for 5 problems in that way. And so this is a good way to kind of move from continuous to get it to happen by arranging every 5th problem. And then you can take that. Now, if I were to jump up here to every 15th problem, that's going to be too big a jump. I'm going to get ratio strain. Since the ratio of responses to consequences, and we're always talking about the response-consequence relationship. We know the closer the consequence is to the behavior, the closer the contiguity, the time, the connection between this happens and this happens, that strengthens the response-consequence relationship. When we're trying to solve a problem behavior, we want to break that. If we got a problem behavior, we want to provide no reinforcement so the response occurs and there is no consequence, nothing happens. So that's how we try to break a behavior that's a problem, is break that connection. But since we're trying to maintain or strengthen behavior, this chapter is how to maintain behavior with a ratio schedule. We want to go continuous, move it to a ratio don't strain it, make this gradual, and that can move us up to where we can now get 5 math problems, 10 math problems, 5, 8, maybe 10, 12 math problems, so the child can now work an entire sheet. Sometimes you give a child a sheet with 10 math problems, and he just tears it up. It's too much. So we might say, okay, we cover them, say, just work this first one. Okay, now work another one. So we start, and now we say, okay, now work 2 in a row, work 3 in a row. And I cover the sheet to 3, now work 3 more. And then eventually I can put a whole sheet of 10 problems. I can work the endurance up and strengthen the response to get up to, maybe get it up from an 8 into a 10. So that's the advantage of a fixed ratio. You can move it, gradually thin it. Now, the disadvantage is I can't always count every time the number of times something happens. So one of the other schedules under intermittent is, it is a ratio schedule. It's either fixed, which means a set number, give me 3 behaviors, 3 correct behaviors, give me 5. I got a fixed number, or I go to a variable. So I'm going to take some average number. It's going to vary. So I might do a variable ratio after I get it up, say, to 8, or I get it to 3 or 5 or 8. I could move over here to a variable ratio of, say, 4. So I'm going to reinforce it maybe after the second problem, and he does 6 problems, and I say, good job. Next time he does 3, next time he does 7, maybe here he does 5, and he does 9, then I go back to 4. And since it doesn't know what's coming, he's just going to keep working, because here I come with a sticker, I come with a high five or some praise. So a variable ratio lets me move around. I don't have to count every single time. I just need to keep it not too far apart, and I can spread out the responding and get more responses and not have to stop and count every 3, every 5, every 8. So typically a teacher working in a classroom is not going to be able to go to every kid. Okay, he just did 3, one over here, he did 3. Okay, they're going to just have them working. They're going to move around and look and say, oh, Johnny, you're on number 6. You just did 6 problems. Here's the sticker, keep working. Or goes over by Mary and says, oh, Mary, you're on number 5. Keep working. So with the variable schedules, they don't know exactly when it's coming, but they will know from a history of reinforcement. I've been reinforced for doing this, so I get it in my repertoire. I've got it up to speed, and now it's going to be a little more natural. Natural environments are more likely to happen on variable schedules. We typically, some things we expect to work every time. Like if you go to a vending machine to buy a can of drink, you typically put the money in, you press the button, you get a drink. So typically you're getting a continuous reinforcement every time you put money in, you get a drink. Once in a while, the machine malfunctions and you don't get the drink. So when you put the money in, it doesn't work, all of a sudden, it doesn't work. So what happens when you try to put the money in and it doesn't work? What do you do when it doesn't work? Well, first thing you do is you shake it, you hit it, you push the button, you hit the coin return. Some people actually call it names. They cuss at the machine, they scold it, they shake it some more. Now, when you got the soda the first time, you didn't shake it. You push the button one time, you put the money in. But now you find yourself pushing the button repeatedly, or shaking it, or hitting it, or calling it names, or hitting the coin return repeatedly. And that's that extinction burst. When you've been getting reinforced and all of a sudden the behavior reinforcement stops, you try these extra behaviors. And sometimes that will even induce aggression. People will hit the machine. Now, sometimes when you hit the machine, the can shakes loose. So you end up getting reinforced for hitting the machine. So there's where some accidental intermittent reinforcement happened. Back to our schedules, I went from continuous to ratio, fixed ratio, then I went to variable ratio. And what we know about these schedules of reinforcement is we get patterns of behavior. So if we reinforce behavior on a ratio schedule, we get a pattern like this. We'll say we'll put it like we'll make it an FR5. So we're going to get like 5 responses. We're going to reinforce it. And then there's going to be this little pause. Now, this research came out of research with animals in labs. So pigeons and rats and monkeys would press the little bar 5 times. A pigeon would peck the key 5 times. And then when that happened, the machine was set to drop a grain box in for the pigeon to eat. Or the mechanism when the rat presses the bar 5 times is a dispenser that drops the pellet in the little tray. And the rat eats the pellet. I did a rat lab, not a pigeon lab. So my rat would learn to first press the bar reinforcement, then I thinned it to 3 and then to 5. So the rat would go and press it 5 times. The grain would drop, the pellet, food pellet. Rat would eat the pellet, and then the rat would respond 5 more times. And then get reinforced, and the rat would pause, and then 5 more times. So what we got was this pattern of a fixed ratio. Respond 5 times, get reinforced, pause to consume the reinforcement. Basically, the rat's busy eating a pellet 5 more times, and this little tick means here's reinforcement. So because we know about science and behavior and the timing of delivering a reinforcing food pellet or praise, whatever, sticker for 5 math problems, or 5 bar presses in a rat cage, or 5 pecks on a key on the wall of a pigeon chamber, produces a pattern. Behavior becomes predictable. So this is a fixed ratio pattern, and it's some places it's referred to as step-like. This is a step-like pattern. Looks like a set of steps. I think the technical term, depending on how many articles you read and how many books you find, you will see this referred to sometimes as a break and run. So they take a break and they take a run at it, take a break and take a run at it. So those are the 2 common ways to describe the pattern of responding with a fixed ratio schedule, a break and run or step-like. And because we know these lawfulness relations of behavior, we can set schedules of reinforcement, the rule of which we're going to reinforce behavior, and adjust when we do it, and then move it off of a fixed ratio to an easier to manage variable ratio. Now, with the research in the animals and the non-human research, these patterns are pretty clear. With humans, we don't get the exact same patterns. If you got a guy working at the factory, and for every 10 units he makes out of a punch press, he knows every 10 units I make is $30. The next 10 years, 30 more bucks. He may not necessarily stop because he made 30. He may work till he gets what he needs to make for that day, but he's going to get some pattern. So rats and non-humans and humans basically show the same sort of patterns, but they're not going to match exactly. This came under experimental conditions. People can be told, if you just keep working through the morning, that the boss is going to run and compliment you. So there can be some, because humans are going to think some more because of the rules of the job and the peer support, the peer pressure to get the more parts done. The guy in the next department needs those doorknobs so you can put them together faster. So we can get little different patterns. But for the science of behavior, based on the experimental analysis of behavior, where we discover the principles of how when you schedule consequences based on response requirements, ratios, we get these patterns. So then the other one for variable ratio is, if you don't know when it's coming, I'm going to leave myself a little bit of room here. This makes a very different looking pattern. So if I were to graph this, what I'm going to see is that a variable ratio schedule looks more like this. And here's reinforcement on the 2nd, here's the 6th, here's the 3rd, here's the 8th, here's the 12th, here's the 15th, here's the 3rd, here's the 5th, here's the 12th. So reinforcement is very intermittent. It's going to average maybe 8 or 5, whatever. So the rat in the chamber is going to be pressing that bar, and a pellet's going to drop, and it's going to drop another pellet. And because it doesn't know when it's coming, you're going to keep responding. And you get a much higher sustained rate with a variable ratio schedule than with a fixed ratio. You still get high rates of responding with ratio schedules, because the other one, next week again, we'll talk about time-based schedules. With time-based schedules, a certain amount of time has to pass before you get reinforced. And those make patterns we'll go into next time. Right now, we're going to stick with ratio. So response schedules do produce predictable patterns, and the step-like pattern is going to be pretty steady, and the variable ratio is going to be a higher rate. And with it, again, you'll see next week that the interval schedules, you can't speed up reinforcement, because if you got to wait, if it's every 5 minutes, then you can't get the reinforcement any faster. You're not going to respond any faster. So you'll see this difference. I'll put all 4 graphs up next week. And the idea is going to be that ratio schedules produce higher rates of responding. What's the science behind it? Because the responder, the person, the rat, the pigeon, the organism, can control the rate of getting reinforcement. So on a variable schedule. Now, I have trouble, like I said, a factory worker might get paid by so many parts. So he knows I've racked up 10 bucks, 30 bucks, 20 bucks, 50 bucks. So he may know, because of verbal behavior, and he knows what the production quotas are. He may not take these pauses, but he will produce numbers of units because of rules. The best example for a variable ratio in real life is going to be something like gambling behavior. If you go to a slot machine, and the behavior is going to be put the coin in and pull the handle. In the old days, you actually had to put the coin in. Nowadays, they're more electronic. But the idea is you've got this lever pressing, this lever pulling. In fact, nowadays, I think you just push a button. But I remember learning about this. I remember going to California, and I stopped in Vegas to go gambling. And I thought, okay, I know how addiction works. Behavior gets so reinforced that you just keep coming back to it. And when you're gambling, particularly, you don't know that very next card, the very next round of poker might work. The very next blackjack, I might get the very next deal, I might work. And the very next handle pull, I put in a nickel, I might get reinforced. So you're going to just respond as fast as you can, because the more I respond, the quicker I can come in contact with reinforcement. Now, the gambling casinos know all this stuff, and they program these machines to maybe pay off on a VR 300. So someone comes in and plays the machine, puts it to $300 in it, they don't win. Someone comes along later and keeps playing the machine, and all of a sudden they hit it. Because that machine has been played for a while, and at some point it's going to hit the payoff. I have a buddy that used to go to Vegas, and he would go up to the cashier and say, here, give me $300 worth of silver dollars. He'd play the dollar slots. And he'd then hand her a tip, say, here, thank you for making my change. Here's $50. By the way, which one of these machines is about ready to go? And she'd say, oh, number 18. There was a guy played that for an hour and a half, never won once. That machine's ready to go. He'd go over, start dropping money, and win $500. Come back, give her $100. So, okay, what else is hot here? So there, he didn't just play the odds, but the machines are programmed to pay off on some schedule. Now we know overall, they can't have the machines pay off too much. They can't make any money. People know you gamble, you go, you're going to basically lose, but you might win that one time. Kind of like buying a lottery ticket. Could be me, some lucky jerk's going to win $1 million. Why not this lucky jerk? Well, here's $2. I'll take a shot. And I find myself, when the lottery's up to like $1 billion, I'm thinking, I know the dangers of gambling. I know it's easy to get hooked. But for $2, for me just to fantasize for the next 3 days, maybe me, that's worth $2. So the next 2 days, I got my house, I'll buy a new car. I think I'm going to go to every movie that I want to this weekend. I'm already spending the money I haven't won. Then when they get the ticket results, I look at my numbers and I look, I didn't get a single number, not even one set of numbers. It was only $2. It was a fun fantasy trip and wasn't too expensive. And when I would gamble and go through Vegas, because I know about addiction and gambling, I know I'm going to lose, I set a rule. If I ever get ahead, I'm going to put a certain amount of money into gambling, and once I lose it, I stop. And if I get ahead of that, I stop. So I come out ahead of the game. So the first year I drove through Vegas, I went in, I would drop 20 nickels, $2. My limit was $2. I'm a grad student. I got no money to spare. I got to buy gas to get back to Kansas. So I would get $2 worth of nickels. I would go to the nickel machine. And I knew that it didn't matter how fast I pulled it. I knew I had 20 nickels. When it was done, it was done. So I would put a nickel in, I'd pull the hand, I'd watch them spin. I'd look at the people around me, do some people watching. Some guy hit a jackpot, and I think, well, that machine's no good for a while. Put in my next nickel. I was also traveling. I'm not going to spend much time in a casino. I was on the road to California. So I would take my time, put the nickels in, take the time. And when the $2 were gone, I left. Said it's $2 for 20 minutes of entertainment. And then on the way back, I would stop and drop another $2. And I'd do that over the years. One year I went in, I think I was up, occasionally I'll play, all of a sudden I'll win a quarter, 5 nickels back. So I get to play a little bit longer, and I get a bunch, and then maybe I win 10 nickels. But in the end, I would lose $2. One year I went in, and on about the 5th nickel, I hit a $5 jackpot. And the thing just ching, 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 and I had $5 worth of nickels, and I still had maybe 10 left. So I thought, okay, my rule was, if I ever get ahead of $2, I'm ahead of the game, quit. So I said, okay, I'm stopping. I took that $5 worth of nickels and changed and dropped them in my pockets and didn't realize how heavy $55 of the nickels are. So I'm walking to the parking lot with my pockets sagging full of nickels. I get to my car, and then I empty my pockets. I throw all those nickels under my floor mat. Had parking meter money for the next year. That's the one time that I won. So I know the dangers. I know how this works, and I'm not going to let myself get addicted. Even though I'm out of grad school now, I still can't afford to lose more than $2 at a time. So what we got here then is ratio schedules, variable and fixed. Variable is going to be some average, and fixed is going to be a set number. And so those are the ratio schedules. Ratio strain I talked about, if you jump up too far, all of a sudden I jump here to 20, the organism might just stop. So that's just too much responding. It's not worth it. Because I have to go through. So I need to know about ratio strain when I do use schedules and basically shape that dimension of responding, the rate of responding, shape that up with my learner gradually to build their stamina and endurance to respond and solve 10 math problems or clean 2 rooms in the house, whatever it is. And then what we have is also progressive schedules. A progressive schedule is where I'm trying to get a little more bang for my buck. So I might set it out at a where I'm going to gradually just raise it. So I might go from wanting 2, and then 4, and then 6, and then 8, and then 10. So I'm progressively raising it. It's pretty much on a pattern. And I'm trying to reach the upper limit. At what point do I get the biggest payoff? At what point do I strain it where the person stops? So progressive, the teacher's giving out stickers and says, how many stickers can I get? How much work can I get for these stickers? So she'll give stickers, and then now you have to do 2 pages of math, and I got to do 4 pages of math, so she can see about how far I can get it to maximize performance. And then when I see the learner peaks out, then that's when I stop it. So one way to do a reinforcement schedule is to start it out and progressively push it till you think you just about hit the upper limit. Sometimes they call that an adjusting schedule. You keep adjusting because if I'm getting this, I can get more. If I go to, there's a point at which I strain it, a point at which it's just like, that's just too much effort. The payoff is just not enough. Because what I do when I do this, it's the same amount of payoff. I'm not paying off more. So I will work a problem each for a sticker, then I'll work 2 correct for a sticker, then I'll work 4 for a sticker, but at some point, it's just not worth it. I can't take this up to 100 problems likely. At some point, the person goes, I'm tired of doing math. I'm tired of doing that. So we'll be aware of these human limitations, and then we'll get, so that is one of the other schedules is a progressive ratio. Again, these are ratio schedules. Okay, now to tie all that into behavior in everyday life and how we would use it, what you're likely to see, we're going to talk about the matching law. Now, the matching law is a basic foundational knowledge concept. And the idea of matching law is that the organism, rat, pigeon, person, will match their behavior and their effort into whatever the task is based on the amount of payoff. So this was a simple schedule of give me 4 responses, give me 6, give me some average, and that's a regular schedule. Life isn't always got everything on a set schedule. What we have in life is called concurrent schedules. We're doing multitasking. I'm doing the dishes, I'm doing the laundry, I'm watching TV. So I put the dishes in the sink, I run in hot water, I let it soak a minute, I go out and I start the laundry. Laundry's going to run, I'm doing a nice light load, so I just set it for 18 minutes of quick wash. I got a whole bunch of dirty soiled clothes, I'll make it run I'll pick a half hour. So that's going to be based on time. That's one schedule. So I don't need to go back and check it. I'm not going to get reinforced quicker if I check it. It takes so long to dry the clothes. But I'm doing that task. And I will do 1 load of laundry. I'll do 2 loads of laundry. And I'll probably go, if I have only 3 or 4 of the whole day, I'll just keep doing laundry all day. At some point, if I had to do 20 loads, I just do some one day and some the next. So the matching law says I'm going to match the effort. Now, in the meantime, I got the dishes. If it's a small amount of dishes, I'll wash 8 dishes. I'm done. Or the next day we have more food, so now there's 12 dishes. So the number of responses, number of dishes that I wash, forks, knives, plates, spoons, that's going to vary. So I will do some amount of dishes. Now watching TV can pay off how many times I turn on the TV, how many times I change the channel. So with this idea of matching law, you're going to match the amount of effort to the payoff. And there are different schedules for doing this. I can read 5 pages in my chapter and take a break. Or I can look at my phone and check for messages. Messages can roll on in at any point in time. So I can check my phone so many times, and if I get a message and I read it and I answer and I check again, I get another message or an answer, that can be having put behavior into that because my effort is pretty low and my payoff is I'm getting news or information or answer. If I'm texting, tends to be very back and forth. So I've got my choices of how to allocate my behavior. And so when I would look at this in everyday life, when I'm at the home and a client working with a child and I'm watching what the child's doing, I'm kind of new to the case. I'm saying, okay, what does he do? What's the problem? What does he do? How much does he do it? When does he do it? When does he not do it? Because when he's not doing it, he's doing something else that's not the problem. So can I focus on good behavior? Look for good behavior. You can sometimes find good behavior. I look for good behavior and I find it, I got something to reinforce. So I'm looking at what is he doing? He's playing with this and he plays with this and he goes over here. So whatever he's doing, I know has reinforcing properties, but he changes from one thing to the other. So I realize he's getting satiated on this, he goes over here. Matching law says he's going to put the allocated amount of behavior to the payoff. If this becomes too much like work, he'll switch over here. So behavior goes where reinforcement flows. We're going to put our effort with reinforcements. If we've got a little girl's drawing pictures and she's showing them to mommy in the kitchen, mommy, oh, that's a nice picture, tell me about the colors, and mom gets busy cooking, and mom is not complimenting anymore, she's going to take that behavior and she's going to go over to dad and start showing dad pictures. And dad's complimenting pictures. So there it's called behavioral contrast. So all of a sudden the behavior schedule with mom lowered because mom's busy right now. She's got to stir and cook. So that schedule drops off. Dad's schedule isn't changing, but you'll go over and take that behavior there where the payoff is. So behavior is going to move around based on the schedule, based on the availability, based on the amount of effort. And Management Law basically says you're going to give the minimum effort you can for the maximum payoff. So I'm looking, what's the easiest thing I can do that's the most reinforcing? For me, I have to build a CEU, a 50-minute lecture for next Saturday in Texas. And there's a program I really like to watch this evening. So the behavior it takes to read the pages, read the articles, and build the PowerPoint and practice it is going to take me several hours. But the program, every time I look up, I see the program. So I know how my behavior is going to allocate, at least to that program's over. If I take my eyes off it, I'm missing the action. So I'm going to allocate my behavior based on matching law, what the reinforcers are. I'm also working on, in my Toastmaster Club, I have to give a speech tomorrow morning. I'm scheduled for a speech. So I'm going to give a speech called The Life and Times of Captain John. And I've got this little suitcase, a little briefcase sort of a lot of things from the time I went in the Army, from my draft notice induction, from the training in the Army, from the travel orders I got, to the receipts. I have this little thing that's been full it's been sitting. I shoved it in, but when I got out of the Army in like 71, I just put everything in this little thing. I stuck it on a shelf. And the other day I found this. I pulled it out and said, I'm going to give a speech about this. I'm literally having to organize these items that I'm going to talk about tomorrow for 5 to 7 minutes. That's going to be easier to do than to build that hour-long presentation. So I'm going to allocate a little more time tonight to the speech because it's also due in the morning. And the CEU is not due till a week from tomorrow. So there, the timeline and the amount of effort's a lot more, but I have more time to do it. So based on reinforcement from my responses of writing the CEU and practicing the items I want to talk about, we'll be moving around based on matching law and based on the least amount of effort. They're both going to get done, but on different schedules. So if you're trying to see, why is he doing that? Why does he do that? Well, it's the most reinforcing thing he can do right now. Well, why does he do that? Well, why did he stop? He lost its reinforcing properties. He satiated. Or it became too hard. It's too hard. This is too hard. I don't want to do it. So walk away and do something else. And so that's how reinforcement schedules and effort and opportunity come together to let us look at, understand, track, record, adjust reinforcement, and move behavior, match behavior, and try to reach a level of acceptable behavior for whatever we're trying to accomplish for that objective, or for ourselves, or for our family, or for our students. And that's basically, in a nutshell, Chapter 21. So those are most of the terms right in the front of the chapter. There's some visuals on it. There's kind of trying to tie it to our ABCs and some examples. So I'm going to hope that made a little bit of sense. You kind of building on what we already knew, kind of did some callbacks to reinforce what you've already learned. That makes sense. I'm seeing people shake their heads. I'm out of here. Mic drop. Okay, that's what I had for tonight. You have the opportunity. You have a gift of 16 minutes, actually 15, to use any way you choose. Pick your reinforcer, pick your schedule. If you can't wait to dive in and get busy reading about this, because I got you so excited about schedules, I want to read that chapter. I want to see what the examples in the chapter are. You know, CJ, let me go early. I'm ready to go. Because you already got the point. You got the point for showing up. And hopefully you got the points that I was making. So that's what I had planned for tonight. That's what I wanted to cover. Good luck with the chapter. I think it's pretty straightforward. Hopefully we'll kind of plant some ideas. And then again, if you run into questions, fire me an email. I can sometimes answer the email back. Or if you want to chat, we'll just pick a time, jump on the computer. Sometimes in 5 minutes, I've answered your questions and you're ready for the next thing. I try to be as available as I can. And most people have emailed me, find out we can usually match up pretty quick. So have a wonderful weekend. I know you're here. I'll be into week 2 of a new course. You had your 2-week break. There was your post-reinforcement pod. You worked like crazy for 11 weeks. Then you get the post-reinforcement pause for 2 weeks. So now you're responding again. And with weekly deadlines, you're basically going to work to get to that deadline. Then you're going to take a little pause. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Professor?
Yes, go ahead.
I want to just kind of go back over something that you said earlier.
Sure.
When you were on the consequence and you were talking about turning up the volume or turning down the volume, depending on who turned it on.
Okay.
Or down. I just wanted to make sure that I understood this correctly. So you said if I am going to decide that I want to turn down the volume, then that's positively reinforcing. Yeah,
it's positively reinforcing. Because if you turned it down, that meant it was too loud. It was aversive. You turned it down, so you got decreasing the intensity of the stimulus. That would have been negative reinforcement. If there's something present, I want less of it. I want to avoid it or escape it, or I want to lower the intensity. So by turning it down, I get reinforced by escaping from the loudness. That's negative reinforcement. Now, if you turn to one of your kids and wife, honey, would you turn that down? It's too loud. Then they turn it down, and it's still negative reinforcement, and it was socially mediated because another person did it. It's still negative reinforcement.
Okay, got it. I thought I heard something different.
Yeah, well, thank you for clarifying, because I might have said something different, so that's why you called me on it.
No, I just heard it different.
Okay, and so good. And of course, if it's, they turn that up, I can't hear it. Well, either you turn it up, so now you're increasing the presence of the intensity of that stimulus.
Got it.
That's positive reinforcement because I've added more light. It was dark, I did a behavior, now it's light. I wanted it light, so I'm positively reinforced. It was too noisy, I turned it down, now it's not so noisy. I'm negatively reinforced because I've reduced the intensity of that. This situation that evokes the behavior, the antecedent, is what that is going to be changed. Those environmental conditions are changed by your response. So that's why we talk about this response-consequence relationship, because the contingency is I had to turn it down to make it quieter. I had to turn it up. There's a contingency. If I don't turn that knob, it's not going to get louder or softer. There's the contingency. Contingency is what changed behavior. Now, you don't always adjust it, because if the volume's okay, you're not going to turn up or down. So when that is too loud, or a phone call comes in, now it's too loud, I turn it down. So these conditions that are going to affect and evoke the behavior is going to be, do I want more of this? Do I want less of it? Do I want to escape and avoid it? Or I want accent, I want more of it.
Understood.
Outstanding. All right, thank you for asking, appreciate it. And I got you on the schedule. I got you down for showing up. I saw you log in. All right, I will post this recording on the website and that same Professor Know-It-All YouTube, and I'll put a chapter 22, and then you're welcome to watch that again if you want. All right, have a good evening, good weekend. Like I said, dive right in there, read that chapter. Oh, that's exciting. All right, good night, Ronald. Antoinette, I gotta make sure I give you a point for dropping in. Antoinette, if you didn't hear it, I was just saying I've recorded this lecture, and I'm putting it on the website. I'm going to stop the recording, then I'll post on the website. It'll be either this evening or sometime tomorrow. Okay, and with that, comments? Okay, all right. See you next time.